Good afternoon. Welcome to Legal Candy. We hope that everyone had a enjoyable holiday season. I am your host, attorney Candice Colucci, and we are thrilled to be back in the studio. And we are here. We've got a special guest here who is returning from our last time that we had her on. So if you guys had missed our episode that Melissa Thompson was here for, who is just an advocate and a survivor of several different things that has just made her a hero in my eyes and to so many different people. But we've delved into the role that she has played as a victim and then a hero when it comes to Harvey Weinstein. And where we originally met her for was because of what she had been dealing with in regard to the aftermath of her being a victim of Hurricane Ian, the hurricane that hit at the end of 2022 down in the Southwest Florida area. And so What's been so interesting that's happened just within the last week that I think has re-sparked this entire thing was that we are now looking at the fact that they have been now releasing, in part, some of the Jeffery Epstein's kind of known affiliation of people. And so now we're looking at, again, I think the world is now kind of reopening the issues and putting more attention on the fact that of women that have been victims of sexual assault. And in my opinion, it's women who have been victims of sexual assault that have been ignored. So it's now kind of reopening the same thing. So we were already talking about it, but now here we are again with the world kind of all going again. They want to know what celebrities were involved in it, whose names were attached to it, who was connected to potentially these victims. And so to now have Melissa Thompson here, who has turned herself from a victim into an absolute advocate and has stood up for not just herself, but so many other people. So we are so happy to have her here, and we are going to delve into exactly really what took place with her and Harvey Weinstein, her sexual assault, and then what the aftermath really kind of was of that. So with that, I'll give you our legal disclaimer before we delve into today's legal confections. A quick reminder is that the information provided is just for general informational purposes and should not be construed as any legal advice. It is not intended to substitute for or replace professional legal advice. If you require legal advice or assistance, you should consult with a qualified attorney. I am one. You can reach out to our office or another attorney. So with that said, let's get into some of the background of Harvey Weinstein before we start actually going into the specific allegations with Melissa Thompson. So Harvey Weinstein was very well known in the Hollywood arena. He was a film producer, and so he was responsible. I mean, his company stemmed from, I think, all the way back into the late 70s. So he was responsible for movies like Pulp Fiction. Love it. Flirting with Disaster, which was so good. Shakespeare in Love, that won an Academy Award, and so many countless other films. And he has worked with some of the biggest movie stars in the arena. And what we did end up learning about him, and what was it's kind of an interesting fact, is that as we're starting to see some of these celebrities now being prosecuted for the actions that they're taking against women, we're learning that these allegations stem back to when they pretty much first started becoming kind of a star. So I think his allegations go back to the 80s of people coming forward and making these allegations. And so Harvey Weinstein, as most people kind of remember, the Me Too movement really kind of sparked around that whole entire thing. So one of the outcomes of women finally getting together, utilizing social media in a way to say, I have been a Me Too. I have been a victim too. You're not alone. Because that's what ended up happening. Because make no mistakes, people have been making these allegations to police departments for a very long time. The same thing with who's Mr. Pudding? What's our African American? The one who's just going to be convicted? The guy from the Pudding? Who was it? What's his name? Can't remember his name, but he's in jail now. So the one who, he had the show and he did the pudding. The names escaped me now, but someone else who just got convicted. But also, these allegations are not brand new, and what really happens legally, which I like to kind of explain it because that's one of the things we want people to understand the background of what happens legally in these cases is that when someone has been a victim of a crime, they turn and they let usually a state attorney know, or they'll call the police and they report it to the police. But it is still the police's and the state attorney's discretion to go forward with charges. And there are a lot of times that they believe that there's either not enough evidence, it's one word against the other, and so they don't go forward. So the fact that now finally somebody like Harvey Weinstein was finally not until 2018 was he finally arrested on these charges, they weren't because the allegations started coming forward then. They were because all the allegations had already been pending, and finally all the women came together and started this Me Too movement to where finally it couldn't be ignored, to where state prosecutors were going, okay, now we need to do that. And that is one of the most unfortunate things about the reason why a lot of women don't come forward is because of that type of backlash and the fact that they sometimes feel like they're going to report it and nothing's going to happen, which does happen a lot of times. And so in 2018, he finally gets charged in New York City. And it goes to trial. And it goes to trial on, I think there was 4 different women who had allegations during that time. And the jury ends up coming back. They deliberate for 10 days, which is a significant long time for a deliberation. And they come back and they only find allegations and counts. They only find him guilty on counts for 1 victim. So that means for the other people, they felt that there wasn't enough. They ended up finding a mistrial, that they could not agree, that they believed that he had committed those acts. But for the one woman that they ended up finding that he had committed those acts against, it ended up being for rape. And so he ends up getting charged and sentenced to 23 years, and then he also ends up going to California and doing charges there. But those aren't all of the charges. And that's one of the things that people don't realize is that there were over 80 women who have come forward and have said that they have been a victim of Harvey Weinstein. And there are things like statute limitations that have made it to where he can't be charged criminally for those charges. And then some discretionary decisions by state attorneys that they're not going forward with the charges. So for the situation, we've got Melissa Thompson here who's going to tell us a little bit more about what took place with her instance with Harvey Weinstein and what does that look like, because I can only imagine the strength that it takes to come forward. But Melissa didn't only have the strength to come forward, but then she turns around and has the strength to stand up for herself and for other people and to continue fighting for years at this point. So I want to start by welcoming Melissa. Thank you so much for coming back and being on the show. I guess we didn't scare you enough to where you didn't want to come back, but I don't think it's possible to do with you. I think your strength is definitely unmatched. I couldn't imagine the position that you had been in. So just give us an idea of what took place. How did you originally meet Harvey Weinstein?
So I was having dinner at the Cipriani restaurant in Manhattan near the Apple Store, and I was with my boyfriend at the time and his boss, and they worked for a hedge fund, so they dealt with high net worth individuals, and they were just familiar with the upper echelon of society in New York City. So I was eating dinner with them, and I would excuse myself to use the restroom, and one has to go down a very narrow hallway to get there. So on my way back to the table, I physically ran into Harvey Weinstein. I maybe was looking down or to the side, and it was a narrow hallway, and all of a sudden we just physically collided, because I don't know if he saw it. I thought it was just an accident. We bumped into each other, literally. And I was working with on a product at the time. I'm a technologist by background. I built technology.
How old were you at this time when you met Harvey Weinstein?
I was 27.
27.
27 or 28. Yeah, 27 or 28.
Okay, so you were working on a technology project. What was this project that you thought that he would potentially be interested in?
So this was 2011, by the way, and it was a live streaming video platform that now is ubiquitous, like FaceTime, but at the time it was not. And we built this video platform that could integrate, video into advertisements. And it was a novel way of showcasing content. And I didn't know Harvey Weinstein, his background. All I knew is he was a man who made movies. And when I knew he was at the restaurant, when he entered, the people at my table waved hello to him and told me who he was.
Okay.
That's how I knew who I ran into in the bathroom. But I was 27. And
so you meet him, and so at some point in time, you decide to do a meeting with him by yourself, correct?
Well, so I pitched him in that hallway.
Okay.
We're going to start up. You go for it. You try.
Oh yeah, you do the elevator pitch that people talk about, like how quickly can you pitch your idea? This is a world of like New York City. Yeah.
So I said I don't know you well. I think my boyfriend might, but I know you make movies and you create content, and I have a platform that is a novel application of content to create a global couch conversation between, where you have many viewers interacting about your content. And it was novel.
Okay.
He said to me, that sounds really interesting. Why don't you give my office a call and I will set up a meeting with my marketing team. He took out a business card.
Okay.
On the back, he wrote his email address.
Okay, so you set up the meeting, and so let's get to where, so you go to meet with him, because this is pivotal, because this becomes, you end up recording this interaction, and this is the interaction where people can find this on the internet. It's one of the things that really sets you apart, was because you had this video recording of your meeting with Harvey Weinstein when he first becomes insanely inappropriate with you. And so you go to meet him, and where do you actually go to meet him at, where you recorded this?
So that's an important point. I walked into the intention meeting with his marketing team. That was how it was framed. I walked into his office, and the receptionist, who was at the front desk, saw me in the system on the calendar and made a change. She said, "Oh, hold on a minute." And she walked away from the desk, came back, and I later learned what she was doing was she saw me and how I looked and how old I was, and profiled me as a potential victim. The people who worked in his office were helping him.
All knew, enabling him.
So she walked me to a conference room, or what I thought was a conference room. I sat down, I started setting up my demo, and then I hear in the background, shush up, don't bother me, do not come in, do not bother me, I can't talk right now. And it was Harvey Weinstein saying those words to other employees, but I couldn't see them. And into that office came Harvey Weinstein by himself. After he closed the door, and I only know it's because I watched it on tape later. I didn't hear it at the time. Why did you
record it?
I recorded because the premise of the meeting was to show him a technology based on live video feeds that one could all, like a live stream platform, one could record them, but they were live. And so the whole demonstration of my technology was showing him how us talking right now in this meeting feeds into my platform, so we're watching ourselves on the stage.
Okay.
And we knew it was recording, and
when it's recording from your camera. I mean, your laptop, right? So you're recording him just like we're on Skype or a video. Okay.
Exactly, and he's sitting right next to me, and he knows it's recording. And when he came into the room, he triple locked the door, and one lock needed a key to unlock. So.
And you are where? You're literally in the office building?
I'm in the office building, in his office.
In his office building.
Styled like more lounge chairs than.
Okay. So we've got to jump to a quick break. So stay with us, because we are going to delve into what takes place after Harvey Weinstein comes in, locks the door, and unfortunately what takes place between you and him that leads to your sexual assault. So stay with us for a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the studio for Legal Candy. We are here with Melissa Thompson. She is still here. So she was just getting into the details regarding her interaction with Harvey Weinstein. So you are there with Harvey Weinstein. You were at his office, you're in a private room, you've got your camera set up because you're there for a business meeting to pitch an idea to him. And this is actually being recorded. And so during the recording from that we had seen is that it takes place, he's flirty with you, he's inappropriate with you, he touches you. And during that actual interaction that's being recorded, it's very unprofessional. You can see that you're trying to stay professional, but he is very unprofessional at different times about it. And what I want to ask is, and I hate to say, okay, from a women's perspective or any of those kind of things, but I think there's just a piece of it always is that from a woman, when somebody may ask you, is like, hey, well, you may have been a little flirty to him because you're pitching an idea to him. Like, what is your response to somebody asking you something like that? It's like, I'm watching the video and you seem a little bit that you're kind of flirty with him. Are you inviting this behavior by him?
I could see how one may think that, but in the moment, I'm doing a demonstration. And I was there to pitch a startup. The word startup in itself is a vulnerable word.
Yeah.
It means, it's burgeoning. And I believe he knew I was looking for an opportunity to have an anchored big client. So I was trying to close a deal without putting myself in danger. And so to do that, he was so aggressive in his inappropriate behavior. I was trying to volley it back to him, and I was young, and my job before that was I was a trader at Goldman Sachs, and that environment was not appropriate at many times either. And so I think that in my mind,
it's where that line is at, right? It's I think the hard part when you're engaging in a situation where you want something from a male, you're pitching something to him. So if he likes you, right, that's going to be a piece of it. If he likes you and he likes the product, then he's going to invest. But if all of a sudden you go straight to saying, oh, you're being inappropriate, stop it, then there's no opportunity for you at all. He's going to walk up and he's going to leave. So there is a line there, which is why the responsibility starts with him in that situation to not cross that line. You've come there to be professional. You didn't start being unprofessional. He does. But then I think even when you're seeing it and I think people sometimes ask when they're going, well, why'd you put yourself in that situation? Why were you there? Any of those kind of things. And I think that line sometimes gets blurred between what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. And sometimes it is like, okay, you're saying you're volleying it back. And I really liked how you said, it is a vulnerable thing when you're pitching something because you're virgining. It puts you in a vulnerable situation, and then if there's someone who takes advantage of it, it puts you into a position where you're like, how do I respond that I don't lose every opportunity I have that could end up making and breaking my life here?
And it was also me and versus with my company. The company was separate.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to pitch the company and protect myself personally.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. Okay. All right. So you end up leaving that meeting, and then you end up going somewhere else with him afterwards, where his behavior escalates into something that becomes uncontrollable. Can you explain to us kind of what happens after that initial meeting that leads to the sexual assault? So
during the initial meeting, Harvey made a phone call to his chief marketing officer, and he said, if we use your product, it would be given to the marketing team, so you're going to have to meet with them. So he called the chief marketing officer and used a cryptic way of speaking that didn't make sense to me at the time, and then said to me, I have to go screen a movie. I'm available. I'm sorry, this gentleman, this chief marketing officer, is available at 5:30 to meet you. We're screening the movie Trevega Grand Hotel. Mm-hmm. Trevega Grand Hotel, and they do have screening rooms there, so that made sense to me. And also, it's often that meetings take place in hotel lobby bars. So that also, I'm at a hotel, but intention is not to go to a hotel room.
So you go and you meet him at Tribeca Hotel, New York City.
Tribeca.
And that's when you said you didn't think anything. And you're speaking again about the fact that you hear that there's certain terminology that he's using with people he's working with, because it seems to be very clear as it's coming out of the woodwork, is that everybody is aware of this behavior. It wasn't a secret to his assistants, to his partners, to his team, to the companies he was working for. But because no one was prosecuting these allegations that were taking so long until truly the Me Too movement, it was ignored and it was enforced by everybody around it. And I think that's also the surprising part about this whole list of Epstein, which is who really knows fully. I think it's all the list of Epstein is really who's connected. We may have some of the flight logs of who went on the flights to this Epstein Island where allegedly all these women, these girls were raped. But it obviously shows and wakes everybody up and goes, God, everybody knew. Everybody knows. The only people who didn't know, and the only people who really didn't know was kind of the public, but everybody else behind the scenes all were very aware of this while these women were unfortunately becoming victimized with no voice to be said at all. So then now you go to Tribeca Hotel, you meet up with him in Tribeca Hotel, and what takes place?
I expected to meet with the chief marketing officer.
Okay.
But at the time of the meeting, Harvey Weinstein walked in the front door, which is counter to his kind of screaming at movie down in the basement theater. So he walks in alone, and in a very rushed tone, he said, "Come with me. We have to go quickly." And it was almost as if we were going to some screening, and he was late. So I quickly got up, put my things in my bag, went with him, and he goes to the elevator. He presses number 3. I still am. I'm more and more getting more and more fearful, but I dropped the name of my boyfriend at the time and his wife, who they knew each other. I was trying desperately of Hail Mary boundaries.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what would happen. And maybe on the third floor it was a screening room. I didn't know, but I found myself there. And that's not it's a weak way of saying it, because everyone has their own agency, but I found myself in positions that I'm realizing as or after they're happening. Because he has a process. He has the same hotel room. It's his army of enablers.
Now, do you end up in a host? So he scurries you along to following him, and you say the word that you feel like, and I can tell that you are feeling defensive about it, because I know this is what so many people in the public have probably questioned, and people in forums and on the internet and stuff are literally saying, why would you put yourself in a position where you're in a hotel room? And you've kind of explained it exactly. It's like, first of all, remember the overarching piece of it is you're 27 years old, about to pitch something to one of the most powerful people in the country at that point in time, who could literally change your entire life. So you really kind of are going with the flow. If all of a sudden he's like, let's go, come here, over here, follow me, all of this stuff, you're still going along with it because there's something there that you're trying to pitch to him. And so he's in a very powerful position of which you're following along. It's not making it weak. It's making you human. That's really what it is. We've all been in a situation like that where we potentially say yes to something we maybe should say, I don't really know yet, because there's something that you're trying to get on the other side of that, and it's a piece of the whole entire thing. Like, I've been in situations where I felt that way too. Where's that line at is most of the time, but it definitely doesn't make you weak at all. It makes the person who takes advantage of you an absolute disgusting monster. That's what it is.
A practice monster. He assaulting women for longer than his life.
30, 40 years of that. I mean, who knows how long? I mean, he's obviously probably been doing it his entire life. So you follow him along the way. Does it lead to an actual hotel room? Is it a place? It's an actual hotel room.
So he crosses the 3rd floor, elevator opens. One of the first rooms, looking forward, right to left, the first room. Before I knew it, he had swiped it and the door was open and I was inside it, and then I was inside the room, realizing I was in a hotel room. I'm just catching up mentally to understand where I am physically and how to act. I just was caught off guard by everything, and everything happened so fast because his goal was to get victims in a locked place where he had control. So he wants to hurry through, any small talk. It's get to the room. Then next step is this. So he gets himself positioned between me and the door. Okay. Make sure all the locks are locked. And he is a a very, very large man.
What is his size? Like at that point in time, like he's how much? How much does he weigh?
I would guess 375 pounds.
And how tall is he?
I would guess. Not 6, maybe 5'10".
And how tall are you? And what's your size around that time? Do you remember?
I'm 5'8". I was wearing heels, so the height wasn't the issue. It just, I felt so diminutive physically next to him, which is added to the mental game he was playing.
And you're teeny. I know not the people on the radio can't hear you, but you are small, little. So it's not like you guys are not going. You're not about to go head to head and wrestle it out the same weight limit at this point in time. There's very much of a physically, not just. He doesn't have just that. He doesn't have the emotional power over you. He has the physical power over you. So now he's standing between you and that door. And then at that point in time, what takes place?
I got very, very nervous and scared at that point, and so I quickly set up my technology so it would start recording. Because at that point, I'm not recording because it's a demonstration.
Okay, yeah.
I'm completely. It's even hard for me to say it this many years later. I'm so off kilter and nervous, and when I feel that way, I want to make sure I have evidence or what's going on in case there's something wrong. And there are exclusions in the law of privacy for if you think it's criminal or if you suspect something going on. I suspect something bad was going to happen. So I just want to get in there, put demonstration, press record, and then I excused myself to the bathroom. Went to the bathroom and tried to get my head together and try to calm down, try to breathe and think about what are possible ways out. I came up with a few ideas of what to say, but I walked out and he was standing there naked.
Naked. This man is standing there naked. And that seems to be the reoccurring allegation several different times with women of them coming out of a bathroom or coming out of anything, and he's just stark naked there. So he's stark naked there.
Vulnerable state. I didn't expect him to be naked, so again, I'm taking. He has these power moves that he puts on where it's the way he speaks, the way he does, but it was shocking with it. And then I started to freeze, and any thoughts of what I was going to say to leave the room, I didn't remember them. Then I started freezing. Then it's fight or flight. Then you go to fight or flight mode, which is what I was in, and he doesn't ask permission or questions. He physically positions himself in ways that reduce or nullify any options to victim.
And so then he physically rapes you then?
There were struggles. But high level, yes, that's what happens.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine it. And I think that is, it's like you hear that so many different times of what you would do in that situation. You don't know until it actually happens to you. And I think we had talked before about I really see myself as a very feisty person. I have been in fights growing up. I feel like if I was ever in a situation like that, I wouldn't put myself into the situation. And if I was, I'm going to fight for my life and it's going to turn into this big fight. But you never really know what you're going to do in that situation. Not to mention a 300-pound man, the physical force of that, not to include you're dealing with the emotional aspect of it, and then now you have to try to fight for your life. So many people judge the situations, and that's what I think is happening all over Weinstein. It's what you see all over the internet. I think there's a lack of empathy for the victims, and especially now with it's Epstein again, they're saying, well, why did these girls get on a plane with this guy to a private island? And they're putting themselves in those positions, and so they deserve what's happened. And that is so insanely far from the truth. And why so many women don't come forward is because they're ashamed of what they did or should have done. And you've explained it to say that's not what happens. And you said, I thought about what I was going to say. I had all this planned. And then just because you're planning in the bathroom, you really didn't assume when you walked out there would be a Hollywood executive who has made millions and millions of dollars, huge films, who's just going to be stark naked at 300 and something pounds and then physically abusing you. My heart breaks for the fact that you had to go through that experience. What happens afterwards? What takes place afterwards that you finally decide to come forward?
So I had the recordings of the first meeting and from the hotel room, and I'm not somebody who seeks media attention, but the New York Times story broke in 2017, and a few women came, let's say 10 women came forward at the same time that were known in Hollywood, actresses, and the New York Times profiled there is he's a serial predator. And then that was the birth of Me Too. So people were saying Me Too. And there was actually running spreadsheets going around.
So you were part of it. So you did not come forward before. So it was 2011. So it was about 2011. So this takes place. You're forced to move on with your life in silence, which that type of pain.
I felt powerless.
Yeah.
And he also was very nefarious. He was very nefarious. So when I did ultimately come forward, the reason I came forward in 2017 after it broke that he was a predator and other victims, because I read other victims' stories and it sounded like the words could have been coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
The exact same MO. Second, I had these videos, and to my knowledge, then and still now, no other victim had that concrete of evidence. And in sexual assault matters, it's often a he said, she said situation.
Almost every single time.
And in the criminal court, that's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And if I didn't come forward, and if he didn't go to jail, wasn't convicted, didn't go to jail, I would have felt. I felt responsible for women. I felt responsible to victims, not me. Every victim that came forward, I felt like I had a piece of the puzzle that could be instrumental in helping to bring justice to all victims. And I had to swallow the fact that I had to put the worst thing that ever happened to me out there in great detail in a legal complaint and on the news. I was on the front page of every paper, and I was on TV. I had people following me. He hired a Black Cubist agency, and I was being followed and spied on after I came forward. I mean, it was terrible, but I wouldn't change it because I feel like it made a material difference to bring justice.
Oh yeah, you absolutely did, and so you felt that responsibility because that you had the videos. With your plan was just to experience that, hold on to that pain that I can imagine you have to deal with every single day, that you were not going to come forward until you were like, I have to do this because the evidence I have can be the difference of him never being able to abuse somebody else again. Because without those kind of things, up until the date when finally in 2018 that he gets charged with something, everybody had been he said, she said, and no one had done anything about it. So we are going to go to a quick commercial break. When we get back, we're going to talk about, after you had all that strength to come forward, and you are now presenting your evidence to the right officials, you get an attorney, what does the aftermath look like that? Because now you have to tell the world what you've been through, take that backlash about everyone else's opinions about what you should and shouldn't have done. So we'll talk about that when we get back from the break. She felt compelled to come forward, and that's a common thing that you hear from victims that finally do come forward, because millions and millions and millions of them don't because of the backlash of it. What also was an interesting thing when I first started practicing law and I met with my first sexual assault victim was, as I was researching the law behind what is allowed to come in and not come into trial, is it took a while for court systems to finally determine that during a trial where a sexual assault victim takes the stand, it is now inadmissible for you to cross-examine them, meaning the defense attorney, to cross-examine them about their prior sexual history, because that was so big. It was such a huge thing that was happening for years for victims that would take the stand, that would finally have the courage to come forward. And people don't understand. As I was talking to my client at the time, as I explained to him, I was like, listen, you have to be prepared for what happens next. making the initial report is one thing, and it took me a little while to understand the gravity of that, and making sure that I explained it to my client and said to them that this is not just today, it's the rest of your life. This is not today, it is a trial in front of him and a jury and sometimes random people of explaining what happened. And the most important part is there is a potential you're going to be cross-examined by another attorney whose only job is to make you seem uncredible, a liar, out for money, all of those things, which is just the insult to injury. It is further victimization of a victim. And so it took years for finally the court systems to go, listen, we can't have that level of abuse. Like, they know that there's abuse already, and they were allowing it for so long, which is why victims never came forward, because they would take the stand and all of a sudden the cross-examination would be any person they'd ever slept with. Like, oh, well, you slept with this person. We're going to call all your exes to the stand at this point in time. And they were so afraid to come forward. And the system finally put in some parameters to try to protect these victims, so they felt like they had some kind of protection, which we're still nowhere near where it needs to be. So for someone to come forward in your shoes, I know the gravity of that. So after you come forward, there's a difference between criminal and civil law. So we've talked about this before to people, saying criminal is obviously the punishment is that they can go to jail. That's the main difference between the criminal and civil. So he's got criminal allegations, which is why he's sitting in jail now, and he has countless civil allegations, because some areas they were unable to bring criminal charges because of the statute of limitations. So when you came forward at your instance, when you finally came forward, was there statute of limitations issues for your criminal side of the case against Harvey Weinstein?
So my act of coming forward, of coming out on this, was through a civil complaint filing. That was that was the injury to the world that this happened to this person. And shortly thereafter, that same day, the calls came in from district attorneys from multiple states, from media, and I want to comment on something you said about using one's past against her. As soon as Harvey Weinstein, as soon as I came forward, Harvey Weinstein had a retainer, a private investigator agency, Black Cube, and I was put on the Black Cube list, and so I was followed, I was stalked, and there was his PR person made a PowerPoint of how to discredit Melissa Thompson, and it was some very nice journalist gave me a heads up about this, because they did all the work that the defense attorney would do if I was on the stand, and they gave it to all media. And
this is all after you actually had this on camera too. So it's not even like, I understand the fact that somebody has the right to defend themselves, and I've been a criminal defense attorney, so I understand that that's exactly a part of it is anybody takes a stand, we want to figure out how we're going to discredit them. But to discredit you and to build this case against someone who has actual video evidence of this sexual assault is just mind-boggling.
So the Manhattan DA called me into their office, and I was interviewed for hours. My attorney was present, and the assault happened in 2011, and in 2017 is when Me Too blossomed. And so the statute of limitations on sexual assault in New York State is 5 years, and that was
5 years. 5 years. So what people have to understand about that, it's five years. So we have some states that have moved to it being no, there is no statute of limitations on rape of a child now, and some states have no statute of limitations on rape, but a lot of states do. So 5 years. You've got 5 years from the date that it happens to finally come forward, or no matter what evidence you have, if you come forward after 5 years, they can't be criminally charged with it. That's what statute of limitation means.
It wouldn't matter. And so, despite that, I would be a complainant in the criminal trial, but I couldn't because my statute of limitations had expired.
Mm-hmm.
And some states, by the way, it's as little as 1 year.
1 year
from the event.
1 year
to unlimited.
You have 1 year to get it together after a rape, and have the balls to come forward now and to tell the world what took place of you, and to be judged by the world.
And a judge and a defense attorney and the media and you said people were worried about retribution. The media now put a megaphone on that because everyone it's actresses and a Hollywood tycoon.
Yeah.
With a tycoon enablers. The board of directors of his company was.
There's billions and billions. What also was so interesting about the situation with Weinstein was that there was billions of dollars on the table because the company, the Weinstein Company, if everybody remembers, you couldn't watch a movie that didn't begin with the credits rolling of Weinstein. I mean, everybody knew the name if you know anything about films. So they had a company reputation behind there because they knew they had been hiding this for years. So there's nothing they wouldn't have spent on it. There was no line that they weren't willing to cross to try to silence people and destroy the life. Like, all these other stars have come forward, and ex-stars and people who never became stars who were like, because I didn't allow his advances, he ruined my career. I mean, he blacklisted me. And what you're saying is no different than what they have all said, which is the exact same ideas. Like, and you still came forward. I go back to the fact of like how just impressed I am with the fact that you were strong enough to come forward against a multi-billion-dollar industry and man, in order to protect other women. I mean, I think we all owe you a thank you because you're part of the reasons why he was able to be stopped. And it's like, I'm happy the state attorneys were all interested in calling you after you filed the civil complaint. But the sad part is that it took the Me Too movement to highlight that. If it had been 4 years, if you had come forward in 2011, I have no doubt at all, nothing would have taken place at all.
Someone came forward in 2015 and they did a sting operation where she had a mic on and they caught him on a mic, and that was the NYPD. And they failed, they didn't prosecute him. And the reason behind that was that the woman was a victim of Berlusconi in Italy. She's a model. And so she was sexually assaulted in the past. And so to bring forth this as another sexual assault, they didn't think it was strong enough to come up for defense attorneys to not grab based on credibility.
Yeah, well, because they seemed like it couldn't be possible that a woman was sexually assaulted twice. The odds of that taking place are blowing your mind. Okay, so we are getting short on time, so I want to get to kind of towards the end of what takes place is that you've passed statute of limitations on criminal, but not civil. So you're able to sue him civilly. And that takes you now becoming, you're very educated, but you now become your own advocate to a whole different degree, and you learn all about the civil system, who you have to sue. You're suing him, you're suing companies. Like, give us a little idea of what that was like. And then the fact that they file bankruptcy. He files bankruptcy in the company so then he can try to escape that liability. So give us a little idea of what that took place of you now becoming this class leader to this potentially class action lawsuit against a multi-billion-dollar man in industry.
Sure. So some civil complaints are filed as an individual. I'm the victim, and there are suits that are filed as class actions. There were 10 plaintiffs in my class action, including me, and it was filed that way because if every victim decided to come forward at that point and file a civil case, it'd be hundreds of cases. And so by filing it as a class action, the 10 of us really represented every other victim. I think people will be familiar with getting an email about you may be entitled to a credit check because we had a data breach. If somebody went to court as the named plaintiff and fought that battle, and then there are the beneficiaries that are Jane Doe's, that when we ultimately came to a victims fund and allocation, Jane Doe's would get monetary benefit.
Yep. So in essence, people sometimes don't get that whole idea what the class action is saying, that even though she comes forward with 10 other people, they represent not just them as a class, but the potential of who all else could be victims. So they now stand up for everybody and go, we're going to go through with the case. If we get a recovery, then we get the opportunity to reach out to all the potential victims and go, please come forward, let us know if you've been a victim, and we now can potentially cut you into the settlement. So you're representing not just yourself, but the potential of hundreds of women and young women that have been potentially sexually assaulted by him. So it just goes to the testament again of you just being an absolute hero, but now you're actually a physical now captain of this advocacy against Harvey Weinstein. Okay, so you've got that process, and you start this lawsuit.
I want to comment on the defendant
Yep.
for a second, because Harvey Weinstein was the perpetrator of, he raped me. But we had 25 named defendants, and then up to 150 John Does.
Yep.
And the named individuals were every individual board member of the Weinstein Company and the Weinstein Company as a company, and Harvey Weinstein as an individual. But all those people were his enablers. And the board, I'll say this, this shows how everyone knew. The board wrote his employment contract for the Weinstein Company so that for every felony conviction of a sexual nature, Harvey Weinstein owed his own company back $250,000. So they built into his contract a cure for when he gets convicted. Then also, there's a notion of these people knew or should have known, because they were, all of the company operations were under their purview. And during this period, one of the board members literally came out with a song on Spotify called "I Should Have Known," and it was him singing about being in a glass tower with high-powered individuals from Hollywood, and how and he explained the bad things that happened. And the laws had changed over the years. I was the only one who fell into this most recent statute, because I was the most recent victim in the class, where he should have known it was happening. He wrote in lyrics, "I should have known."
Yeah. I mean, everybody definitely knew. So at the end, so you go through this, then the bankruptcy ends up getting filed.
The Weinstein Company is a defendant, and we put them in there as defendants because if Harvey Weinstein was alone, or any individual is a defendant, he or she could file for bankruptcy and potentially get out of any awarded amount by the judge, and we didn't want that to happen. So we put the Weinstein Company on there because the collectability probability
was more high.
However, they countered. They had their own strategic move, which was to, all right, we're gonna file for bankruptcy. So in the months leading up to March of 2018, they filed for bankruptcy. March 2019, they filed for bankruptcy. They offloaded assets. They transferred them here, there, everywhere.
So now the entire claims go to this bankruptcy court. So now you're dealing with the bankruptcy court. Now, do you finally get to an ending with them where you're able to resolve what takes place in that bankruptcy court?
So all assets from the Weinstein Company were then under the purview of the U.S. trustee and the bankruptcy court, so everything's transparent of how much they have.
Nope. Do you get to an end? Do you get to? I don't want to run out of time without letting the viewers know. Do you get to an end where you get to feel like there's some retribution?
I negotiated on behalf of victims, and there were negotiations from the insurance companies, from their defense, from everyone. There was one representative, and I negotiated a victim settlement fund, and unfortunately, due to the financial position they
put themselves in, by the way, right? They do this. It's a strategic decision to do the bankruptcy 100%, but you're able to be able to find some type of relief after it.
So that dramatically lowers the amount we do.
Absolutely.
So it was estimated just it would have been $100 million victim settlement, and if we went through a civil channel, it ended after negotiations at $17 million victim fund. But that could be applied to the 10 of us, or
Yep.
the 100 people who have come forward, or the 1,000 that we didn't even know about. So,
well, you know what? You are you're an absolute hero in my eyes. I know we're running out of time for today, but like, thank you. Thank you for doing that for not just yourself and for women, but also for men. I mean, anybody who feels like they've been a victim of sexual assault, please come forward. You can reach out to our office. You can find Melissa. She is still fighting for people. We're probably trying to talk to you one more time about all the aftermath of what you've done. But like we've said, thank you so much for being on the show. And we are so sorry for what you've been through, but thank you for explaining what it was like to come forward to be that type of advocate. So